Run your hand along the top edge of your kitchen cabinet door, not the front, the top edge, where the door meets the frame. Feel that? Can you feel that waxy layer? That thick, almost waxy layer that does not come off when you wipe it, that has collected every bit of cooking smoke and grease and heat from the last several years of meals. That is not just dirty. That is baked-on polymerized grease, and it behaves completely differently from the fresh grease that splatters on your stovetop after you fry something. Fresh grease wipes away with a damp cloth. This kind has chemically changed. It is bonded to the surface the way paint bonds to wood, and the thing that most commercial sprays do to it is make it slippery for a few seconds before it sets back down harder than it was before. You can smell it when the kitchen gets warm. That faint, heavy, cooked oil smell that never quite leaves the room even after you have cleaned, even after you have opened the windows. It is not coming from the stove. It is coming from the cabinets themselves, and it has been there longer than you probably realize. Pull open the cabinet door above your stove right now, if you have one, and look at the underside. Look at where the hinge meets the wood. The grease back there is the same grease that is on the food surfaces. It just never gets touched because no one thinks to clean a hinge. What I am going to share with you today costs less than $2 in materials you almost certainly already have in your kitchen. It works on wood cabinets, on painted cabinets, with one honest exception I will get to. And it works on the kind of thick, dark, decades-old grease that makes grown people look at their own kitchens and feel embarrassed. When you are done, the surface does not just look clean. It looks the way it did the day those cabinets were hung. There is a part of this method that is going to irritate you a little because it is so plain and so cheap that you are going to think back on every bottle of degreaser you have ever bought and feel the specific frustration of knowing you did not need any of them. I want you to stay with me through the whole thing because the last step is the one people leave out, and it is the reason the grease comes back in 6 weeks when you skip it. People in my hollow knew me as someone who kept a clean kitchen through every season for over 50 years. My name is Annie Hemingway, and I grew up on a Blue Ridge Mountain homestead where the kitchen ran from 4 in the morning until after dark, where the stovetop was never cold, where lard rendered in an iron pot twice a week, and the smoke from the wood stove settled into every surface in the room. Keeping those cabinet faces clean was not optional. Grease in a kitchen that is used hard is a fire risk, not just an eyesore, and we knew that. My mother taught me what actually cuts through cooked-on grease, and her mother taught her, and not one of those women ever walked into a store and bought a spray bottle of anything to do it. This kind of knowledge is the whole reason I am here, and if it is useful to you, I hope you will subscribe. There is more where this came from: old methods, plain materials, and the kind of practical sense that used to be passed down at kitchen tables instead of sold in aisles. And since you are here, I want to ask you something. Drop an answer in the comments below. Which cabinet in your kitchen is the worst? Above the stove, beside the refrigerator, the ones closest to where you do most of your cooking? Tell me what you are dealing with and I read every single one. Now, before we get into the method itself, I want to explain something that most people get backwards because if you do not understand this part, you will spend money and effort and still end up with a film on your cabinets that will not go away. When grease is fresh, it is a fat. It is slippery and it dissolves in soap the way any fat does. The soap grabs one end of the fat molecule and water grabs the other, and the whole thing rinses away. Every dish soap you have ever used works on exactly that principle, and it works beautifully on a pan you just cooked in. But grease that has been sitting on a cabinet surface for months or years has been through something different. Heat and air together do something to fat over time. They oxidize it, and then the heat polymerizes it, which is a long word for a simple thing. The fat molecules link together into chains and harden. The same process that gives a well-seasoned cast iron pan its slick black surface is what gives your cabinet its sticky brown one. The material is no longer a loose fat that soap can grab hold of. It is closer to a varnish. It has cured onto the surface. This is why your degreaser spray does not work the way you expect it to. The surfactants in those sprays are designed for fresh fats. On polymerized grease, they soften the very top layer. You wipe it off, and you feel like you have accomplished something. But the layer beneath is still there, and it is still bonded, and within a few weeks of cooking, the top layer has rebuilt itself on top of the bond that never broke. You have not removed the problem. You have buffed it. What actually breaks a polymerized grease bond is mild alkalinity combined with light mechanical action, not scrubbing, not scouring, not anything aggressive, combined with time. The surface needs to sit with the right material long enough for the bond to soften from below, not just from the top. That is the principle the whole method rests on, and once you understand it, the two ingredients I'm going to describe will make complete sense to you. Before you touch a single cabinet with anything wet, you need to do something that almost nobody does, and it is the reason the method works as well as it does. The first step has no product in it at all. Take a plastic scraper, the kind used for baking, or an old gift card or a credit card you no longer use, and run it flat along the worst sections of the cabinet face. The top edges of the doors, the area directly above the stove, the strip of wood between the upper cabinet and the range hood. Hold the scraper at a very low angle, almost parallel to the surface, and push slowly. You're not trying to gouge anything. You are shearing off the uppermost layer of hardened grease, the stuff that has built up to the point where it has actual thickness you can feel with your fingernail. This material will come off in small, dark curls or smears, and what is left behind will be a slightly duller, slightly tacky surface. That is exactly what you want. Do not use a metal scraper. Do not use steel wool. Do not use any abrasive pad with a rough texture. Wood cabinet surfaces and painted finishes have a protective layer, a lacquer or a polyurethane or a simple paint film, and once you scratch through it, the raw wood beneath absorbs grease directly into the grain, and the problem becomes permanent. A plastic edge will not scratch through that protective layer if you keep it flat and move it slowly. Take your time on this step. 5 minutes of patient scraping on the worst sections will cut your cleaning time in half. Wipe the loosened debris away with a dry cotton cloth. An old pillowcase cut into squares works perfectly, and then stop. Let the surface sit for a few minutes. You want it completely dry before anything wet goes on. The second step is the one that does the real work, and it costs almost nothing. In a small bowl, mix 3 tablespoons of plain baking soda with just enough plain dish soap to bring it together into a thick paste. 1 small squeeze of dish soap, not a specialty degreasing formula, not an antibacterial formula, just the plainest dish soap you have. The baking soda is the active ingredient here. Dish soap is only there to give the paste something to cling to the surface with. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate, which is a mild alkali. When it sits against a polymerized fat, it begins to break the chemical bonds that hold that hardened grease to the surface. It does not do this violently or instantly, and it does it gradually over several minutes of contact. The science behind it is the same science that makes it useful for dozens of other household jobs. It raises the pH of the surface just enough to begin reversing the oxidation process in the grease. You do not need to remember any of that. What you need to remember is that the paste has to stay wet and in contact with the surface for at least 10 minutes to do its work. If you spread it on and wipe it off immediately, you have accomplished nothing. Apply the paste with a damp cotton cloth, working in sections no larger than about 1 cabinet door at a time. Spread it in slow circles, pressing gently so the paste makes full contact with the surface rather than sitting on top of it. You will see the color of the paste change as it picks up the grease. It will go from white to gray to a yellowed brown on the worst sections, and that color change is exactly what you want to see. It means the bond is releasing. Once a section is coated, leave it. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Do not wipe, do not rub, do not add more, just let it sit. This is the part people rush. And rushing it is the reason they feel like the method has not worked. The paste needs time to soften the bond from below, not just clean the surface from above. After 10 minutes, take a fresh damp cloth. Damp, not wet, there should be no water running off it. and wipe the paste away using slow, firm strokes that follow the grain of the wood. If the cabinet has a vertical grain, wipe vertically. If it has a horizontal grain, wipe horizontally. Going against the grain on a wood surface pushes material into the grain lines rather than lifting it out. The paste will come off carrying the released grease with it, and the surface beneath will look noticeably lighter and cleaner already. For sections where the buildup was especially heavy, you may need to repeat the paste application once more. Apply, wait 10 minutes, wipe. 2 rounds handles almost everything except the most extreme long-term neglect, and even in those cases it will get you most of the way there. The third step neutralizes what the baking soda has left behind because an alkaline residue left on wood will dull the finish over time if you do not address it. Mix half a cup of plain white vinegar into a quart of warm water. White vinegar runs between $2 and $3 for a large bottle at any grocery store, and that bottle will clean every cabinet in your kitchen with enough left over for a dozen other jobs. Dip a cotton cloth into the vinegar solution. Wring it out until it is just barely damp, and wipe the entire cabinet surface, every section you treated with the paste, and the areas around them. The vinegar is mildly acidic, and it neutralizes the alkaline residue the baking soda leaves behind. It also cuts through any remaining grease film that the paste loosened but did not fully lift. You will smell the vinegar while you work, and that smell will be gone within about 15 minutes of drying. It does not linger. Wipe with the grain, use a light hand, and do not soak the surface. Too much moisture on a wood cabinet, even a sealed one, can raise the grain or work its way into the seams around the door edges. Damp, patient, and deliberate is the right approach. Let the surface dry completely. Run a dry cloth over it after a few minutes to help it along. The fourth step is the one people leave out, and it is the reason the grease comes back faster than it should. At any grocery store or hardware store, you can find a small bottle of pure lemon oil, not lemon-scented cleaner, not a furniture polish with lemon fragrance, but actual lemon oil. It is usually sold near the wood care products and costs between $3 and $5 for a bottle that will last you a very long time. Put 3 or 4 drops onto a dry cotton cloth and buff it into the cabinet surface using small circular motions, then finish by wiping in the direction of the grain. You are not applying a thick coat. You are conditioning the wood and leaving behind a very thin, even layer of oil that sits on the surface. This matters for 2 reasons. The baking soda and vinegar treatment, while gentle, does remove a small amount of the natural moisture and oils from the wood surface. That is part of how it lifts the grease, and it is why the cabinets may look slightly dry or chalky after the cleaning steps are done. The lemon oil restores that moisture. It also creates a very light barrier. Not a seal, not a waterproof coating, but a thin film that makes it harder for the next round of cooking grease to bond directly to the wood surface. Grease that cannot fully bond cannot polymerize in the same way, which means your next cleaning, weeks or months from now, will be easier than this one. Buff until the surface has a faint, even sheen. Not glossy, not wet-looking, just the warm glow that a well-conditioned wood surface has when the light catches it at an angle. That is the finish that makes people walk into a kitchen and say the cabinets look brand new. I want to be straightforward with you about what this method will and will not do, because that matters more to me than having you walk away thinking you have a cure for every cabinet problem in existence. If your cabinets are solid wood or wood veneer with a clear or stained finish, lacquered, polyurethaned, or oiled, this method is built for them. That covers the large majority of kitchen cabinets in American homes, and it will work exactly the way I have described. If your cabinets are painted wood, it will work, but use a lighter hand with the baking soda paste and keep your contact time closer to 8 minutes rather than 10. Painted surfaces are more sensitive to alkalinity than clear finished wood, and the paint film is thinner than a lacquer coat. You are not going to ruin them if you are gentle, but aggressive rubbing or leaving the paste on too long can dull a painted finish over time. If your cabinets are laminate, a printed surface over particle board or MDF, which is very common in kitchens built after the 1980s, skip the baking soda paste entirely. Laminate has no grain, no wood pores, and no natural oils to protect. The paste will still clean it, but the vinegar step becomes more important, and the lemon oil step should be replaced with a simple dry buff, because laminate does not absorb oil, and any residue will just sit on the surface and attract more dust. For laminate, plain white vinegar solution on its own, applied with a damp cloth and a little patient pressure, is your best tool. Now, and I want to say this plainly, if your cabinets have grease buildup that goes back 10 or 15 years without serious cleaning in between, 2 rounds of paste may not get you all the way to where you want to be. It will get you most of the way. It will get you further than any spray you have ever bought. But truly ancient buildup, the kind that has gone through dozens of heating and cooling cycles and polymerized layer upon layer over many years, may need 3 or 4 treatments spread over a few days, letting the wood rest and dry fully between sessions. Do not try to do all of that in one afternoon. The wood needs time to recover between treatments, and pushing too hard in one sitting will stress the finish more than 4 gentle sessions spread across a week. The other honest limit is this: if the finish itself is already failing, if the lacquer is cracking, if the paint is peeling, if the veneer is lifting at the edges, no cleaning method is going to fix that. What you are looking at in that case is a refinishing job, and cleaning the grease is still the right first step before any refinishing, but the cabinets will need more than cleaning to look right again. Do not blame the method for a problem that was already there underneath the grease. Those are the real limits. Everything within them, this method handles better than what the stores are selling you. Here is what 50 years of keeping a working kitchen taught me about grease. The problem is never the grease itself. The problem is the interval. Grease that gets wiped away every few weeks never has the chance to polymerize. It never builds into that hardened, bonded layer that requires a paste and a scraper and an hour of your time. The whole difficult cleaning you just did, or are about to do, exists because of the gap between cleanings, not because of the cooking itself. The mountain women I grew up around kept their kitchen surfaces clean not because they had more time than you do, but because they spent 3 minutes on it regularly instead of 3 hours on it occasionally. My mother wiped the cabinet faces above and beside the stove every single Saturday morning before she did anything else in the kitchen. A barely damp cloth, a little plain soap if something looked heavy, and done. The whole thing took less time than it takes to boil water. The cabinets in that old farmhouse looked the same when she was in her 70s as they had when I was a small child sitting on the kitchen floor watching her cook. After you finish this cleaning, after the paste and the vinegar and the lemon oil, set yourself a simple schedule. The cabinet doors directly above and beside your stove get a quick wipe once a month. Not a full treatment. Just a damp cloth with a drop of dish soap followed by a dry cloth. The cabinets further from the stove can go 2 months between quick wipes. The full baking soda treatment once or twice a year keeps the surface in the condition you are going to get it into today. That is the whole system. It fits inside the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee, and it means you will never spend a long Saturday afternoon with a scraper in your hand wondering how things got this bad. Keep a small spray bottle of the vinegar and water solution, half a cup of white vinegar to a quart of water, under the sink. It costs almost nothing to mix, it lasts indefinitely, and it is the fastest surface reset you have for any grease that lands somewhere it should not. You do not need a different product for the stovetop. The cleaning product industry is a very large business, and kitchen degreasers are one of its more profitable corners. A single bottle of commercial cabinet degreaser runs anywhere from $8 to $15, and the companies that sell them spend considerable money making sure you believe the job requires something that complicated. The formulas change every few years. New ingredients get added, the packaging gets redesigned, and the grease on your cabinets keeps coming back, which means you keep buying. Baking soda costs about $1 a pound at any grocery store. White vinegar costs $2 for a large bottle. Lemon oil costs $3 to $5 and lasts for years. The total investment for everything you need to clean every cabinet in your kitchen and to maintain them for the better part of a year is somewhere around $6 or $7. That is not a price that supports a national advertising campaign. There is no margin in it for anyone, which is the precise reason nobody is running advertisements telling you it works. It is not that the companies making those sprays are dishonest. It is something quieter and in some ways more frustrating than that. The expensive version exists because the simple version cannot be packaged and sold at a markup. The knowledge of what actually works on polymerized grease is not a trade secret. It is basic chemistry that any high school student could learn, but knowledge does not come in a spray bottle, and it does not have a label with a bold font promising to cut through grease in 30 seconds, and so it does not get passed along the way it should. Your grandmother likely knew some version of this. The women who kept houses before the cleaning product aisle existed had to understand what they were actually dealing with because there was no bottle to reach for when understanding failed. That knowledge is not complicated. It just stopped being passed down when the bottles arrived, and whole generations grew up believing that the spray was the only answer. The summer I was 11 years old, my mother put me in charge of wiping down the cabinet faces every Saturday morning. It was not a punishment, it was a promotion. In our house, being trusted with the kitchen meant something. It meant you were old enough to understand that the home did not run on its own, that every surface and shelf and jar required somebody paying attention to it, and that the women who had kept that farmhouse standing before us had done so through exactly that kind of steady, quiet attention. We kept a wide, flat tin on the shelf above the dry sink. Inside it was a cloth, a small jar of baking soda, and a corked bottle of white vinegar that my mother refilled from the big jug she kept in the root cellar. No labels on anything, no instructions. I already knew what each one was for because I had watched her use them my whole life. The cabinet above the wood stove was always the hardest. That stove ran from early September through late April, and the grease from lard rendering and biscuit mornings and soup pot lids left a film on those cabinet faces that built up fast. My mother could tell by looking at the surface, not touching it, just looking at the way the light caught it, whether it had been wiped that week or not. She never said anything if I had missed a Saturday. She just picked up the cloth herself and did it while I stood there, which was a more effective lesson than anything she could have said out loud. The lemon oil came later, when I was older and had my own kitchen to keep. A neighbor woman up the ridge, her family had been on that mountain longer than anyone could say, kept a small bottle of it on a shelf beside her dish soap and used it at the end of every cleaning the way some people use a finishing wax on a good piece of furniture. She told me her grandmother had done it the same way. I started doing it the same week and have not stopped in 50 years. The cabinets in every house I have kept have that same warm finish, that same quiet glow when the afternoon light comes through the kitchen window. It does not look cleaned. It looks cared for. Those are different things, and any person who has lived in a well-kept home knows the difference the moment they walk into the room. So here is where things stand. You have got plain baking soda, 3 tablespoons mixed with 1 small squeeze of dish soap into a paste. You have got white vinegar, half a cup to a quart of warm water in a spray bottle or a bowl. You have got a small bottle of pure lemon oil, and you have got an old cotton cloth or a stack of squares cut from something you were going to throw away. That is every material the job requires. Start with the plastic scraper on the worst sections. Flat angle, slow pressure, no metal, no abrasive. Wipe the debris away dry. Then the paste goes on in sections, circular motions, full contact with the surface, and you leave it for 10 full minutes before you touch it again. Wipe with the grain using a barely damp cloth. Repeat the paste on anything that needs a second round. Follow with the vinegar solution. Damp cloth, light hand, grain direction, and let the surface dry. Finish with 3 or 4 drops of lemon oil. The cabinet above your stove gets a quick wipe every month, the rest every 2 months, the full treatment twice a year. That schedule is the difference between a kitchen that stays clean and one that cycles back to where it started. The whole material cost for the first time you do this, including enough baking soda, vinegar, and lemon oil to last you well into next year, is somewhere around $6 or $7. Write that number down next to the price of the last degreaser spray you bought and sit with it for a moment. If you have tried something for stubborn cabinet grease that actually surprised you, something your own mother or grandmother used, something you stumbled onto by accident, put it in the comments. I want to know what people are working with out there in different kitchens, different climates, different kinds of buildup. Every kitchen has its own particular history, and I find that genuinely interesting. The next thing sitting in my notes is something that belongs in the same conversation as what we covered today. It is about the one surface in your kitchen that collects more grease than any cabinet ever will, that almost nobody cleans correctly, and that most cleaning products actively make worse by leaving behind a residue that becomes its own problem. If keeping a clean kitchen matters to you, that one is worth your time. Every old farmhouse kitchen I have ever known had one thing in common. The woman keeping it understood that a clean surface is not the goal. The goal is a home that is comfortable to live in, that does not cost you more than it should, and that holds its condition year after year without demanding a fortune to maintain. Get those cabinets clean, condition the wood, and keep after them a little at a time. A kitchen that is cared for steadily never has to be rescued.